the purpose of this is to really discuss allyship and understand how we can all leverage it in our lives, but also primarily to support women of color. So we have a pretty diverse panel here to share their various perspectives. Why don't we just start on your end with introductions, and then we'll launch into some questions.
My name is Asha Collins. I work at McKesson Corporation. We're the largest drug distributor in North America. It's a Fortune 5 company. I'm a vice president there, and I run our U.S. clinical trial sourcing business.
I'm Jared Carroll. When I was 14, my dad told me he was gay. I didn't tell anyone until I was 20. When I was 27, he died of AIDS. That's why I got into teaching, and that's why I got into writing. And now my business, for the last year and a half or so, is helping people tell their stories and also writing around issues of equity, diversity, inclusion, social justice, based on my personal mistakes and learnings and experiences.
Hi, it's on, right? My name is Adele Mees-Warner. I am the Chief Employment Counsel here at Pandora. I support the HR team, anything that's employment related that come to me in my team. So super thrilled to be here for the past 2.5 years. And I'm really, really excited to be part of this panel because I've had quite a long journey to get to where I'm at today. I'll share a little bit of that with you later on. But for me, I wouldn't be here where I sit today without having a lot of allies, people who had my back when I didn't know that they were even there. So I am extremely happy to be part of this.
Excellent. I'm Chris Phillips. Here at Pandora, I'm our Chief Product Officer and EVP of Engineering. Basically looking after all things product development, from design to building to shipping the products that hopefully you all are enjoying. I'm very humbled to be here and I'm very excited about this discussion and hope that I can help and contribute.
Excellent. And my name is Samaya Maadu. I'm a diversity and inclusion strategist. I'm a consultant, and I help organizations have conversations like this, create a plan to create more equity and inclusion in their organizations, and figure out how to measure that as well. So this is a personal, close to my heart. I developed a movement called the Ally Movement post-election. I feel like all of us, not just people who are at the top of the hierarchy, but all of us have power in some way and can be an ally. What I liked most about what Joe said is that although he's a white male, he also is deaf and hard of hearing. So he belongs to two groups, right? And it's important. There's intersectionality that shows up in different ways, and there's room for all of us to be able to both be allied for, as well as be an ally for someone else. So keep that in mind as we move forward. Excellent. So I am going to start with the ladies and just talk a little bit about your experiences, because I think that's important. As you all know, most of you are here because you've seen data. You care about this personally, right? But also, the stories are important. We can get a lot of bad news, but there's also some good news out there. So for Asha, I'll start with you. So Shonda Rhimes wrote a book recently, and she coined a term called first, different, and only. And sometimes as an intersectional woman, that may be you in different environments. Could you talk a little bit about that unique perspective of being a woman of color in the workplace? And then from a personal standpoint, you know, how does that feel? What are your worries? What are your challenges? Some days you worry about how to carry yourself or different interactions. Talk a little bit about that experience.
I have the next hour for myself, right, just for that question. So one of the, I didn't say a lot about my background too during my introduction, but a couple things that sort of really ties into that. So I'm originally from Detroit. I'm originally from the city of Detroit, not like a suburb of Detroit. So I went to Detroit public high schools. Also got my PhD in microbiology from the #1 program in the country, in the world at that time. And working sort of through those worlds, and also became the first Black woman getting my PhD in cancer biology from the school too, so it was a first. And it's one of those things too, so I graduated with my PhD in 2005, and it was in the paper and people were lauding me like, oh, that's really, I'm like, it's not good. Like there's nothing a Black woman should be doing as a first, and especially not a PhD in cancer biology in the 21st century. Like it didn't make any sense to me. So I think a lot of times when we are first, and I think I then went on to management consulting and did a number of other things too, where I was the only woman there, the only Black person there, the only Black woman at the table making decisions. And those are times when, well, one, a lot of times because it's happened so often, I forget about it. I forget that the reason why people might be looking at me strange is because, one, they probably think I'm younger than I am, I'm a Black woman, and for all these other reasons too. I wear bright colors and I don't care, like a number of different things, right? And it becomes background in wallpaper in a way I don't know is necessarily actually healthy, right? So I think sometimes I forget about it. Usually I'm reminded very quickly about it. One of the things that it really helps me or sort of drives me to do, though, is to make sure when I see other people who look like me, especially people who might be younger or just newer to whatever scene that I'm in, that I'm welcoming them and that I'm making sure that they're not just within that room, but they're at the table with me in whatever way that I can make possible. And one of the things I would say, too, why I'm also really excited to be a part of this panel is because that pathway for me to be the first has really been ushered in for me by a lot of people who did not look like me. I think when I graduated, when I defended my dissertation, my dean of students actually apologized to me. And I was like, well, you could have apologized like 3 years ago. I thought I was gonna die and not finish, but okay. But I think there are just so many people all the time, no matter what we look like, no matter who we are, just working really hard on our behalf to make sure that we can still go through it. And so for me, it's just the fact that I have been the first and I'm often the only person at a table who looks like me, it just makes me that much more committed. One, really prove my allies that the investment that they're putting in me, that it's going to pay off. So I just work hard all the time. And then the second part of it too is that I just make sure that I'm clearing that path for everyone else who wants to do the same thing too, whether they look like me or not.
So a little bit about me in terms of background. Some of you may know this, but a lot of you don't. I was born and raised in Haiti, one of the poorest countries in the world, really. Growing up really, really tough with very hard upbringing and family situations. Moved here when I was 16 to San Diego. So think of like a Black kid in Haiti with nothing, moving to San Diego and a high school starting in 10th grade, where I was the only Haitian, one of maybe like a handful of Black kids who were not born in the United States, who were immigrants, who went to that high school. It's like being transplanted into a world that was completely foreign, different, everything that you could hate in the world. That's what I was experiencing. But for me, I had a goal in mind, which was to graduate from college, to have a career, to provide for my family. So I didn't care what was happening in the world around me. I was going to get there. But to get there, I couldn't do it alone, right? Because I didn't have any Haitian lawyers, I didn't have any Haitian doctors, I didn't have any Haitian graduates in my family. My mom worked as a housekeeper in hotels. My dad cleaned dishes in hotels. So my mom is illiterate. My dad has a 3rd grade education. So that's what really I started out with in high school. But all along the way, what I did was really try to find people who really could see me beyond just the Haitian girl who didn't have anything. It was, who can I talk to? Who can tell me what is it like to apply to college? What is it like to go to college? What do you do after college? And so I really found those people. None of them were Haitian. Many of them were not Blacks. There were people who were white males who had graduated. There were white females who had graduated. And I used that as really a way to propel me to get farther. One story I would share with being first and only, I remember my first deposition I was taking as a lawyer. Again, I worked hard for everything, but people don't see that. They view you as like you are the younger looking Black woman who's coming into a room with about 5 white males who are partners at firms wanting to take a deposition. The partners at that time came to me and said, where's the attorney for the defendants taking the deposition? I said, you're looking at her. They're like, no, you're looking at her. Go find the partner on the case. Okay, we'll get the partner. Brought the white male partner, came over and said, what's the problem? And the white male partner said, you're looking at the person who's taking the deposition. I share that story because for me, being the Haitian American, being a black person, being a woman, you walk into situations where you feel doubt. You feel like, well, maybe I don't belong here. Maybe I shouldn't be the lawyer. Maybe I shouldn't be taking the deposition. But at that moment, the partner came over and said, she is the one who is taking the deposition. I didn't know at that time that was an ally. I didn't know that's what that looks like. But for me, that was an example of somebody who had no clue what it was like to be Haitian or woman, I assumed, but said, you know, what you've got in front of you is the person who's going to be leading. So I share that story because it's been throughout my career where I've been in situations where it's always, well, there has to be somebody else behind you who's going to do what you want to do. But no, you've got her, and it's me. So a little bit about me.
Wow, thank you both. So those are both stories that show there's a balance of, you know, confidence, proving people wrong, right? Not everybody may have that skill, right? Sometimes you're just like, I ain't got it. I don't have the fight in me today. I just don't, right? So follow-up question for you all is, can you think of a story where an ally assisted you, helped you through a specific instance? And what is the difference between, you know, them mentoring you and sponsoring you, right?
Okay, sure. I shared that one story. I'll share another one it's a work-related one when I went in-house, where an ally assisted me and was also kind of, I would say, sponsor. And I think many of you, if you've gone to these panels, you've heard the difference between mentors and sponsors. Mentors, in my perspective, is somebody who you go to guide you, coach you. They may be a coach, and you may have different mentors at different parts of your career. I have various mentors, some here at Pandora, some are in the legal department, some are not, some are outside. I have mentors. I have 3 children, and I've always worked full-time. I have mentors who help me figure out, when you're just having a shitty day, you're like, you've got work going on and kids and everything's falling apart, how do I navigate through those hard times? I have mentors that way. So they're the people you go to, help me figure out, should I take this job? Should I take this new role? Should I go for this? Sponsors are the people who, like I said, you may not know they exist. They're there to advocate on your behalf when you need it. There are people who, like, if they're talking about a promotion and you're not in the room, people are talking about you, is there somebody who will go to bat for you and say, you know, I 150% support this promotion for Delmies? That's a sponsor. For me, I had an example when, not this job, my last couple in-house jobs, very white male-dominated team I had to go to a training for. There were about 50-plus managers, and they were unfortunately all males. There was no female. That's the sad part of it. And it was my first couple of weeks there at the job, and I was going to do the training, and one of the team members said, oh, those guys won't listen to you. And I was like, okay, why not? Well, they're all guys, and you know, they work that team. They're just gonna walk all over you, so you might wanna bring a guy to go with you. I was like, well, no, I'm doing the training. Lo and behold, my manager found out about it, who was a white male, and what he did was, to me, unbelievable. He went and called the leader of that site where the training was happening and said, you've got a Delmies who's going to be there, these guys need to listen to her. And when I got there, the guys were like, well, your manager called and said we had to behave. You know, so here we are. But what that did was, it sounds very simple, but what it did was setting the tone and environment that was very male-dominated to be like, you're not going to go walk over this woman because she's a woman. You may be all the guys, but I've got her back. Again, mentioning that when you have somebody who's a sponsor, they have your back, they advocate for you, they're like, you will listen to her. And that's one of the stories I would say, a sponsor and an ally at the same time.
stories too. One is something sort of a little bit similar to that, but sort of just people who worked in the background to sort of keep me moving ahead. One actually happened as recently as last week. So part of our business is actually moving to Dallas, and there's this conversation about where should Asha move to, because my customers and team are on the East Coast. All that detail to say, there was a conversation that the leadership team had, our executives had, about my movement. And I got told about this conversation a couple of times. And basically what happened was that I'm not my first, what I really would like to do is stay in San Francisco and not move to Dallas. I have family here, et cetera. And my boss knows that, and she's really clear about that. And so what she actually did was actually set it up so that she was like, Asha can move to Dallas, but she may be there only part-time. She might just fly over, but really what we need to talk about is when we're going to get Asha to London so she can have a global role. Because really this business is US now, but it really needs to be global, and she needs to be in London. So if she's going to move to Dallas even part-time, in 12 to 18 months, we need to get her to London. Right? I mean, that kind of, and she pushed it and she pushed and pushed it. And so that's where we are now. And that kind of sort of sponsorship, right? I mean, that's like guiding my career. It's not just, okay, we're not going to have Asha sort of away from her family the entire time, but now we're actually going to get Asha to the global role that she really needs to really have a much larger even business and role. That's what I call sponsorship.
Great. And gentlemen, I don't know if you want to contribute to the difference between sponsorship and mentorship, but we know that women as a whole will sometimes only apply to jobs that they're 100% qualified for, yet men will do it when they're 60% qualified for a job. So when you are supporting a woman or woman of color, you know, how do you decide how to support them? Is that a conversation you have? Is that something that you're doing on their behalf? And sometimes they may not even know you're working on their behalf, correct?
So, you know, I think it's a continuum. And for me, we were talking about how, you know, as a white male, I constantly want to get better. And I really thought what Joe said was great around learning and finding a path. And I think I've evolved from wanting to make space in the room. So we're having a business discussion, and what can happen is white males can kind of chew up all the oxygen very quickly with kind of commanding the conversation and taking over the points of view. And so for me, it starts with creating space and making it and drawing out feedback from the folks who are in the room. And I don't think that, I thought that was actually enough. And I've realized that's actually sometimes not enough. And it's actually now evolving to specifically actually taking a stronger position and saying, we really need this leader to answer this question, take this to do, like actually assigning and directing the work. It's a little bit like when you were talking about how your sponsor didn't make it an option, didn't just try to create the environment, but actually directed the work and the activity to go in a way that not just creates space for the leader to actually make the decision and drive it or speak up, but actually to really own it. And I think that has kind of been part of my evolution. And I think that is really important in day-to-day practice, in meetings, in activity that can be easy for a woman of color or anyone who's from an underrepresented community to kind of be quiet and maybe not have room, and you got to make that room. So that's one way I try to.
Yeah, thank you. For me, what Joe said in his video resonated with me a few things. One was about power. So when I shared the 30-second 44 years of my life in the intro, but really as I grew up and I learned what my power was as a white man, as a straight white man, and as I chose to explore and learn and read and put myself in situations that I didn't have to, I realized that I had the power to do the right thing. And what that right thing is or was or could be is continually evolving in my understanding of what it is. But there are two different types of power broadly. There's power over, which is a lot of what we're talking about. And this goes back to when I was a 6th grade humanities teacher teaching a social justice curriculum. I had one through line that was, and it applied to every single thing we did. It was, who has the power and what are they doing with it? And the first day of school, we would talk about that, and we would brainstorm words that when we said, I have power over you, what does that mean? And the kids would come up with things like domination, control, disrespect, all these things that we can think of that sometimes people do consciously or unconsciously. And then I'd say, well, what does it mean if I want to share some of my power with you? They said, oh, that's trust, that's respect, that's equity, that's equality, all these different words. And so I think for a straight white man who has that, you have to have that awareness. And the only way to get that awareness, I think, is by validating other people's experiences. I think a lot of times people like me, the PLU syndrome, people like us, right? People like me tend to, well, I don't really get it. What's the problem? And so because they haven't experienced what someone else is sharing or has experienced, instead of saying, well, I don't get it, so it can't be true, or I'm not going to, validate it, what if we said, I don't know what that's like, but I'm sure that was a tough experience for you. What can I do to help? Or even if you're not even comfortable saying that, just listen. Sometimes you don't even need to say anything. I think Gandhi said, it's better to remain silent and thought to be a fool than open your mouth and remove all doubt.
Thank you for that. So we put a definition up on the screen, and I like to look at this often because it reminds me of how I can be an ally, and it also reminds me of the work that I have to do in my career with others. But it describes allyship as an active, consistent, arduous practice of unlearning and reevaluating, in which a person of privilege seeks to operate in solidarity with a marginalized group of people. To me, that is very powerful because it doesn't say it's easy. It doesn't say that everyone's born with it. It's actually a lot of work, right? Because it says you have to unlearn things and learn things, right? So when we look at that, and I'll start with the gentleman, how was the unlearning process? How does it continue to be difficult? And have you made some mistakes?
Made a lot of mistakes. I might take up the whole hour myself. You want to go first, or?
So I think everyone's journey is different, and in my work as a storytelling coach with social entrepreneurs, this is a lot of my work, is helping them understand how to see their journey, how to see how they've evolved. And I think we all have turning points that maybe are very obvious to us and maybe need deeper exploration to uncover. But for me, it went from being my narrative arc from a kid to now is, I used to be a dipshit and now I'm not. Now you could, maybe that could be everyone's arc from just childhood to adulthood. But I grew up in the suburbs and I didn't know any better. And then when I was 14 and my dad lived in San Francisco and I came up to visit him and he told me he was gay, it was like, wait a second, this isn't part of my world. I didn't know how to react. I didn't know how to process that. I had no resources. And so it was this, but there's this conscience somehow that evolved from my teenage years, my college years, and beyond, that said, I can't just stay the same person I was. I don't know how to evolve or what to do necessarily, but I can't keep participating in the same types of thinking that I had been as a teenager, a homophobic teenager, by the way. And so I think as I got older, it was a conscious choice of really self-awareness of, what type of person do I want to be? And realizing that when I didn't know how to be or what to say or what to do in situations, rather than put my foot in my mouth, although I have done that, I think we all have, is to, as you said, kind of let there be space for me not to take it up. And I found that approach is really powerful for me personally, and I see when people do that, that it's really powerful for other people as well. I try and just show, by the way I am in the world is kind of how I try to be an ally.
So it's a heavy question, and I'm married to my wife and my 2 daughters. My wife's Filipino American, and she would say that she's unlearning me constantly. I have a long path to go, and I admire her so much and her brilliance. And I think that one of the key things I've had to unlearn is not to walk around taking for granted and basically being clueless to how others are feeling and experiencing everything that's happening. And there's a really quick story. We, about a year ago, as a company, took a pretty strong stand on Black Lives Matter. And I was at the heart of that decision. And when there was just ongoing, continued injustice happening, we felt we had to speak up. And a lot of that was driven on making sure we create an environment where our employees feel safe. And this feel safe thing is an example of me being clueless. That morning when this was happening, going down, I had a meeting already scheduled with a gentleman on our team who's an African-American man. It was just the two of us. And we sat down, and he's like, man, I can't start the meeting right now. And what's going on? And so I, of course, entered the meeting clueless. Even though I was standing up for this topic, I went in to do business as usual in our 1-hour meeting. And we did the right thing. We stopped, and I had the first wake up to let's understand what's going on. And he shared with me a point of view that I kind of reinforced in something I had to unlearn. And really, it's going to come back to super constant empathy and taking myself outside of my own shoes. We talked about walking on and getting on BART. So for those of you from outside the Bay Area, BART's our transit here in the Bay Area to get around. And he asked me how I feel when I'm on BART and a white police officer steps on. What's just your knee-jerk reaction? And I said, comfort. And I said, what about you? He's like, fear. And it isn't about, it's about that knee-jerk reaction and what you're dealing with and everything that goes on from there. And I was like, oh. And I had to realize how I need to unlearn how I think about situations, because it isn't always from my perspective as a white male. I am coming from a spot of privilege where I take for granted and I'm clueless about some of the things that are happening, even when I'm trying to be conscious and aware and stand up for what I think is right. I don't understand. I can't have true sympathy because I don't have to walk in the bar and have that be my knee-jerk reaction. So this constantly learning how to be empathetic and really do everything I can to, continue to make room and listen. And I am constantly trying to observe and watch what's happening around me to make it a better spot. So that's been one of my big unlearnings and relearning how to operate, which is, I think, is hard for, everybody takes something for granted. And there's this unintended consequence that you being clueless means you're not really helpful. And I think that's kind of the first step.
Thank you for those comments. And I think especially from when you do belong to a marginalized group, sometimes there's a little self-righteousness that comes out, like, oh, well, look at what they did, or, they're not perfect, right? But I check about 3 or 4 boxes on the marginalized group scale. And I like to share that we're all a part of our upbringing, right? So we grow up with a set of values, and we don't always know if those are true or not, or we may be scared to question them. And I always tell people who, although I'm African American, I grew up in Oregon as the first, different, and only of everything. I grew up Muslim, and then we were super evangelical, but my mother was super homophobic. And I grew up in a home where literally, if I'd probably have to pack my bags if I ever came home and said I was gay. But that was what we grew up in my household. And I grew up with believing that was wrong, and I am not proud of the way that I had treated people. and of course, as a person of color, I may think, oh, well, you know, it's ungodly and this and this and that. And it's the self-righteousness, right? And it wasn't until I met a gay friend at work, and literally he and I are besties for like 15 years now. And I admitted to him, like, after 2 days of falling in love with him, I'm like, I cried to him and I was just like, you know, I'm sorry that I believed that you were a bad person because you were gay. And now I do what I do looking through that shield of knowing that I'm a part of many groups, and you being a part of a group doesn't justify you not liking another group. Inclusion is a behavior. So just because you may get the experience of one group, that doesn't mean you may get the experience of every group. So it's a journey for all of us, and I think it's important we recognize that.